Madam Deputy Speaker, I wanted to highlight first that Stephen Yaxley Lennon, Autonomy Robinson as he's known, is holding an event in my constituency at the moment. I want to make it clear, and I'm sure the whole House would agree, this individual is not welcome to spread his xenophobic, Islamophobic, homophobic, racist vitriol in my community or any other community. He seeks to divide rather than to unite people. We do things differently in Manchester. We stand together against hate. Madam Deputy Speaker, can I thank the Backbench Business Committee for securing this debate and thank the member for St Albans who made an extraordinarily powerful speech to hosting the debate. Billions spent on Brexit, she said, rather than education, a deep-rooted systemic problem with funding in our system. And what's united the whole House today, the whole House, is everybody has raised the problem of funding in our schools. It's not a party political divide anymore. Everyone on every side is concerned, and things have to change. Now, we can be in no doubt that after what we've heard today, the impact of this government's continued austerity on our schools is just shocking. The Chancellor of the Exchequer and the Education Secretary have both stated in the House of Commons that every school in England would see a cash terms increase in their funding. Yet this flies in the face of the reality and what we have heard in this chamber today. On top of the funding cuts we've seen in schools, which I'll outline in just a little bit, our schools are having to plug the gaps being experienced in local government, health and many other services. SEND services shattered, mental health services shattered, teachers having to take it upon themselves to take children to A&E. That's an outrageous situation in this day and age. Local authorities face an overall funding gap of over £3 billion next year, rising to £8 billion by 2025. And by 2020, they will have had their core funding cut by nearly £16 billion since 2010. Figures that the Labour Party have compiled show that in 2017-18, local authorities spent over £800 million over budget on children's services and social care due to growing demand, and as a result, they were forced to make cuts elsewhere and to draw on reserves. This is having a dramatic impact on the level and type of services that our councils up and down our great country can provide. Many councils now spend less on early intervention, and youth services across the country have been absolutely devastated. On top of this, our schools are experiencing cuts across the board. Since 2015, the government have cut £2.7 billion from school budgets in England. Despite the Work and Pension Secretary's claim that no child would lose their free school meal eligibility, the Institute of Fiscal Studies found that 160,000 children, 1 in 8, under the legacy system will not be eligible under universal credit. The government's own data shows that as of January 2018, over 4,000 children and young people with an education, health and care plan or statement were awaiting provision. In other words, they were waiting for a place in education. Over 500,000 children now are in super-size classes. There is an unquestionable recruitment crisis in our schools, with the government now having missed their own recruitment targets for 5 years in the row. And for the second year running, there are now more teachers leaving the profession than joining it. There is a crisis in our schools that this government is turning a blind eye to. In fact, there has been a concerted effort by the government to fudge the figures and deflect attention away from the cuts to school funding which they have presided over. The reality is, according to the Institute of Fiscal Studies data, school budgets are lower in real terms than they were 5 years ago. To add insult to injury, we have had the Chancellor's £400 million for little extras, an insult to teachers, schools and children who have faced year after year after year of austerity. The fact is that across the country, schools are having to write home to parents to ask for money to buy basic resources. They don't need money for little extras, they need it for the essentials. If funding per pupil had been maintained in value since 2015, school funding overall would be £5.1 billion higher than it is today. This means that 91% of schools are still facing real-term budget cuts, despite any reallocation over the funding formula. Those in this chamber know all too well the impact on the ground already, and has already been expressed in the debate this afternoon. Head teachers and parents are telling us about it almost daily. Over 67,000 is the average shortfall in primary schools, over 273,000 in secondary schools. Our schools have 137,000 more pupils, but 5,400 fewer teachers, 2,800 fewer teaching assistants, 1,400 fewer support staff and 1,200 fewer auxiliary staff. The government needs to stop its sticking plaster approach to school finances and give schools the funding that they really need. Sadly, it's clear that austerity is not over for our schools. When will the Minister remove his head from the sand and begin to truly hear the voices of schools, teachers, parents and the members behind him and the members in front of him? I've spent far too many hours on the floor of this House, along with my colleagues on the shadow front bench and right honourable members from across the House, trying to get the government to face the facts and act. It beggars belief that government has ignored the school teachers' pay review recommendation of across-the-board 3.5% increase of all pay and allowances, and is now calling for it to be capped at 2%. The first time that this has happened in 28 years of the history of the body. To make matters worse, the government expects schools to meet the cost of the first 1% of the pay award from existing budgets, which have already been cut to the bone. With the economic uncertainty of Brexit and the challenges that is going to bring, to have a government which is failing to invest in education and skills defies all logic to me. As a former primary school teacher, I know the difference a good teacher makes with the right support and resources, can make raise a child's attainment and aspiration. We go into teaching because we believe in the value of education. We believe in its power to create social mobility, as the member for North Cornwall pointed out. We believe in its ability to create ambition for all. This is about our children's future and the future of our country. Our schools need fair funding, and they need it now.
Minister Nick Gibb.
Madam Deputy.